So good morning. I'm glad everybody can make it this morning. Welcome to the SLC3 virtual program, Riding the Wave, Retention and Recruiting Through the Great Resignation. My name is Pat Guichet, and on behalf of the Training and Education Committee and the SLC3 leadership, we are pleased to see you this morning. I know we'd all hoped to be in person, but Omicron had different ideas, but we wanted to keep you all safe, so we're pleased to have this program regardless of being in person. A couple of housekeeping notes. Please make sure you're muted. Also try to be free of distractions, and you'll get the most out of this program, I think, if you do that. If you want to ask a question, send that through the chat, and we will get to those possibly through the program, but if not, at the end, we'll have about 15 minutes for Amy to answer some of those questions. Amy, our presenter, has asked that you turn on your camera so that she can see who she's talking to, and to make sure that you have your name at the bottom of the screen. So for the people that are new, didn't hear that a few minutes ago, if you hit those three dots at the top of your box, and at the bottom of that, it will say change name. If you can put your name and, if possible, the company you work for, it'll make it easier for us to all communicate throughout the morning. And then another friendly reminder that this program is being recorded, and a copy of it's available for everybody on the call at the end of the program. The agenda for this morning is Dr. Amy Narishkin is going to speak to us till about 9:15 or so. After her presentation, it's going to leave us maybe 15 minutes for questions and answers. And then Kelly Jackson, our executive director, is going to close us out. So for those of you who are new, the SLC3 is a community of design and construction industry professionals with a common interest in the betterment of our region. Our planning committee has designed 4 pillars for our organization: innovation, continuing education, equality empowerment, and an all-inclusive workforce collaboration. I'd like to acknowledge our Training and Education Committee. This committee is responsible for approximately 10 education programs each year, including the program today. Brandon Meinert with United States Army Corps of Engineers is our active chair, and the co-chair of the committee is Katie Goldberg with IMEG. I'd also like to thank the T&E committee members right now for all their hard work. I'm glad to be a member of this committee myself, and encourage any of you interested in joining just to reach out. As an additional benefit to this morning, the program has been developed for you to apply for 1.5 professional development hours for a professional engineer, and 1.5 learning units through the American Institute of Architects. Kelly said the documents were sent out to everybody, and you can also find those on the SLC website, the resource page. Okay, this is the really important part. At the end of this, we ask that everybody fill out the evaluation. This is really important. It helps us plan for the next few programs. It tells us what we did right and what we did wrong. So if you could take a few moments at the end and send that in, we would really appreciate it. It's time again for the annual program and sponsorships. If you or your company are interested in supporting SLC3 and gaining visibility, reach out to Kelly for more information. It's an affordable way, and it really helps support this program. Speaking of programs, this program is the second one so far this year. We have a lot more to come. Our next education event is the Virtual Safety Forum on Mental Health and the Well-Being in the Construction Industry. We also have the Design Build 2.0 to DB or not DB. That's a program that helps you understand the delivery methods and the advantages of design build. It's packed with a panel of speakers And I'm sure you don't want to miss that. So be sure to register for both of those. And for all the golfers. So as you guys know, last year's golf tournament was a success. So this year, Kelly and team have added a third course. If you're interested in playing this year, please be sure to sign up by April 2nd. The sooner the better. Make sure you get on a team. And May 2nd is the tournament date. Okay, last but not least, our program, before our program begins, we want to give a special thanks to our different sponsors for the annual training education program. Our annual platinum sponsor is Cozy Wagner. We appreciate their top tier support this year. Our gold sponsors, McGrath and Associate, Ross and Barazzini, Kwame Building Group, and Elk Healy. And our silver sponsors are Farnsworth Group, Kaiser Electric, JF Electric, ABNA Engineering, OWH Architects, Custom Engineering, and Hush Blackwell. So thank you so much to all you sponsors. Now it's time for the program. So like many business sectors, the AEC industry is being forced to ride the great resignation wave. Employees are leaving their jobs. Our employees who are leaving their jobs say they're not just simply leaving for a bigger paycheck, but instead they're in search of something better overall. Therefore, as organizations, it's imperative to take action to retain employees and build strong company cultures, enticing future job seekers to join the company through the career need cycle. To achieve true return on the substantial investments companies make in their employees and create an engaging place for all to work, leaders must create a culture of safety and belonging. This program explores steps to accomplish this, as well as why this is a critical step in retention and engagement within the industry. Now, without further ado, with a PhD in adult education and 30 years experience in teaching, consulting, managing, and research, our presenter, Dr. Amy Narishkin, is a thought leader, a strategist, and a consultant helping organizations make the shift to cultural intelligence. Dr. Amy works with CEO management teams and those who take the lead in organizations to effectively implement the tools for CI, collaboration, and innovation for growth. Dr. Amy is also a certified administrator for the Intercultural Development Inventory, IDI. As a cross-cultural talk leader and a successful entrepreneur, she coaches both individuals and organizational teams, creating exciting, cultural, intelligent places to work and interact. So Dr. Amy, take it away. Take it away.
Good morning. That was a lot of big words. Thank you for doing that, Pat. You knocked it out of the park. I appreciate it. Good morning, y'all. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate it. Hi, Brandy. It's good to see you. And John, thank you for coming today. John Alexander, I really appreciate that. I'm going to share my screen with y'all. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see this? Awesome. Let's see if it'll turn on for me. There we go. So when we're talking about recruiting, retaining, and promoting employees with cultural intelligence, the whole point of this piece is to get from awkward to awesome in conversations. When we're talking with people that are different, and whether that's because of race, religion, gender, generation, ability, it can be awkward talking with somebody who's different. So let's talk about how to get there, get to awesome. Here's our agenda. Now I got a question for you, Kelly, or maybe it's Rebecca. Did you have a chance to send out to folks the worksheet, the one pager? If not, could you put it in the chat box so people could take a look? So what I've got for you is, I don't typically share my slides. If you really would like a slide, absolutely email me. But what I do create is a worksheet, a one sheet that you can fill out as you go, and you can take notes on, and you can doodle on, whatever it takes to pay attention. You'll see on that worksheet our warm-up question. And that question for the introverts in the room, or people who just want a little extra think time, the question that we're going to unpack together first is, what makes employees feel invisible? So hold that question lightly just for a moment, warm up your brain while I go through the agenda so you know what's up for the next hour. That question is going to lead us to define cultural intelligence. If I'm going to put cultural intelligence in the title, I got to get it defined for you. And of course, being that veteran to education, I got to share a story that illustrates how cultural intelligence might play out. And that will help us develop some more vocabulary. Whenever we're talking about diversifying an organization and bringing in people that have different perspectives and backgrounds, you've got to have some common vocabulary. So that's what we'll build together. And as we're building that common vocabulary, what I'll do is kind of break out what it is that keeps us from connecting with our colleagues, with our direct reports, with our bosses. And I'll make sure that you walk away with 3 practical tools, cultural intelligence tools that you can apply today. Then we'll open it up for questions, insights, and I'll show you how to connect with me. And I'll say it right now, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, I sure would love to be. I typically post on LinkedIn anywhere between 3 and 5 times a week. And it's predominantly about cultural intelligence and how to apply it at work. And then we'll do a one-word wrap up. So if you could warm up your fingers, and in the chat box, put what makes an employee feel invisible. And if you work better, just kind of starting with you, like so many of us do, what makes you feel invisible at work? What makes an employee or a direct report feel invisible? And we got time, so take your time, think it out, and just a couple words, 2 or 3 words. That's all we need. So Kelly said, we didn't get the worksheet, Amy. Rebecca, did you get the worksheet from me? Can you post it up now?
Yep, I'm getting it right now.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that. Okay. Janola. Oh, Janola's here. Awesome. Okay, Janola's answering my question. So what makes an employee feel invisible? Not being heard, Janola says. Kelly says not listened to or respected. Amen. Maggie says not being acknowledged or recognized for their work. Spot on. Who's Kay Cook? What's your first name? Could you just call it out?
Kevin.
Kevin, thank you. Yeah, no feedback from a boss. Amen. Kimberly says, Kimberly, I don't know if you go by Kim or Kimberly. A lack of feedback, good or bad. Yeah, people want feedback. Anne says, ideas not being considered. Yep. Jeff, ideas are ignored. Is it Geraldine? Am I saying your name correctly? She says not being listened to. Geraldine, if I'm not saying your name right, please just call it out, okay? John says, oh, good. Okay, thank you. John says a lack of diversity. Yeah, people feel invisible when they don't see people like themselves. John is spot on. Steve Faust, not being included in conversations. Amen. Brandy says, non-recognition of contributions. Can I just point out, we don't lack participation today. Kelly, this is an awesome group. I don't often get this. Pat says not being heard. Lisa says lack of recognition. Sarah, being dismissed. Patty says when management is not concerned with one's why. Yeah, why you're there. And that's particularly important to generations Y and Z. They need to know a why, but I think maybe all of us really would appreciate knowing why. Addie says a lack of recognition. And Tan says when decisions are made on projects, that I'm involved in without collaboration. Amen. We want to be involved. Lack of feedback and praise, not being included in company greetings. Jane says, who did I miss? Dino. I'm sorry, I didn't use your name. Ali says a lack of acknowledgement. And Rebecca posted my worksheet. Catherine says not being acknowledged. Kevin said lack of recognition. Tyler, lack of recognition. I'm going to move on because you guys are amazing and you're nailing it. Look, what makes employees feel invisible? I actually did this research because Brandy and really inspired me to do a deep dive when she asked me to do this with y'all. And then of course I talked to my 2 millennial kids. I've got 4 kids, 2 of which are millennials, and they're off the payroll, by the way, which is really exciting. And they confirmed a lot of what y'all are saying, that when ideas and our needs are ignored, there's double standards from bosses. And several of you mentioned there's little to no real-time feedback. And this goes to the why that Patty mentioned, a lack of transparency and vision, undervalued work and experience, rigid expectations. All of these are not recognizing what John had pointed to, this not recognizing the diversity or the uniqueness that we each bring. So if you could do me a favor, since we have high participation, wait until you see the word chat box so that I can keep up with you. I'd appreciate that. So what's different now? You might see the Pink Panther a couple of times. I kind of like him, giving away my generation. So here's what's going on. Even before COVID, employees expected managers to care, right? That's a given. Before the pandemic, 1 in 10 Americans had symptoms of depression. Well, now that's quadrupled. And I know, Kelly, you'd mentioned that you all have mental illness as a topic you're addressing in February. Well, we're going to touch on it today because that has, and it's not so much mental illness we're addressing as much as well-being, psychological well-being. And the rates of depression and mental illness have quadrupled in our country. And so work is no longer about just paying bills. If the company is not concerned about somebody's well-being, then people are going to have to take things into their own hands. And that's particularly what you've got going on with people who are at retirement age and who are like, I'm out. And even generations Y and X, Y, and Z, if you're not thinking about my well-being, I'm out. So what's an organization to do? Because here's a problem. People believe mental health challenges don't belong at work, because we don't know how to deal with it, right? And you and I both know that when there's sadness or anxiety or somebody feeling invisible, our productivity suffers totally. And just, of course, clinical depression requires professional help, no doubt. However, we've all had those moments when we feel overwhelmed and disconnected from others, our values and our hope. We all feel that. And that's the part that we get to make sure people feel seen. So a leader's compassion, and all y'all are leaders, whether you're leading a department or a company or your home or a community group or a group in your church or your place of worship, a leader's compassion is no longer above and beyond. It's vital to that organization's success. So here now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. When a boss expresses compassion for an employee in a way that's meaningful for them and their experience, not in a way that's meaningful for the boss, but in a way that's meaningful for the employee, that's cultural intelligence at work. Let me give you a definition. It's as simple as this. This is what I help people do. Cultural intelligence enables us to be in conversation with a person who's different from us, so that they feel valued and seen. It's as simple and as hard as that. I'm going to share with you kind of 5 elements for expressing cultural intelligence. We all do curiosity pretty darn well, particularly in American culture. In our dominant culture in the United States, you'll hear people say, I'm just asking questions because I'm curious. Well, cultural intelligence requires a little bit more depth. You take that precious curiosity that you have, you find some courage to slow it down, slow the conversation down in order to start seeing their context, what their needs are, what their uniqueness is, and express compassion accordingly. Damn, that's a lot of words. So let's stop there and let me tell you a story. So sit back, story time, kind of like at the library. That's what I'm gonna do right here. So a week after, notice how compassion is the thing that kind of circles it all, and it'll show up in this story. Watch for it. A week after I did a workshop on empathy, one of the store managers in the session, okay, so this was an oil company, and they have gas stations. And when I say store manager, she's managing a gas station. And she had participated in a workshop on empathy and how empathy relates to cultural intelligence. And she came up to me and she told me she'd been having a hard time communicating with the younger people on her staff. And she explained that the workshop had helped her see that she'd gotten so caught up in the day-to-day running of the store that she had forgotten to connect with her employees. The afternoon after the session, after that workshop, she overheard her team talking and realized she didn't really know that much about them. It made her wonder if that's why some of her employees got defensive when she corrected them. I asked her, so what'd you do? And she said, well, later that day when no one was around, one of my particularly difficult employees and I talked. And you know what I did? She said, I really stopped and listened to him. I heard him out. I sat with him and even looked him in the eyes, and he opened up about his struggles. Then I shared a little bit about my past, overcoming my challenges in my life. And for the first time, I understood where he was coming from. And I think he understood me. So I asked her what happened next. And she said, well, since our talk, I've seen changes in his attitude. He's more understanding with his coworkers, and he's up for doing what I ask him to do now. Empathy helped us connect. And interestingly, he also doesn't let small stuff get to him anymore. All around, he's like nicer and more productive. That manager saw an increase in productivity when she slowed down and took the opportunity to connect with her younger employees. She was able to appreciate her employee's perspective and change her behavior to show him genuine respect. That's the cultural intelligence in action, because cultural differences can show up, like I said, across generations, race, differences in ability, education, all of those. And all of those factors determine our uniqueness. So when we're talking about cross-cultural conversations or initiatives, we need to make sure we've got some common vocabulary. This can be a fully loaded topic. So back to you in the chat box, a couple of words. What comes to mind? What's culture? Just what's culture? Catherine says differences. Kelly says the environment that surrounds you and your experience. Kevin says perspective. Jane says feel of the environment. Yeah. Mickey says common experiences that unite a community. Yep. Tom says and organizations, general feel. Yeah, definitely. Let me give you the definition that I'm working with. Gabe says oops, wait, more are coming in. You're coming in hot. Awesome. Workplace policies, that's definitely part of it. Kimberly says the values, thoughts, and feelings of a group, collective individuals. Yeah, perspective. says Dennis. And Lee says the way team members feel toward each other. Yeah, that's part of it. Jerry says what company beliefs are built on. Yeah, that's definitely part of it. Thank you, Jerry. So do you see how spot on you are with your answers? A culture is a set of attitudes, values, goals, behaviors that a group of people have in common. It's as simple as that. And when we're talking, just back up for 1 second, when we're talking about what a group of people have in common, that group of people can be in your home. Your home's got a culture. When your kids get on the bus in the morning and go to school, there's a culture on that bus. There's a culture in that school. So they're doing what you might say in my world, code switching. They're shifting between cultures. And what every culture has in common in a school, in a place of worship, in a town, in a city, in a country, in all of those places, there's culture. There's visible culture and invisible culture. And because I'm an educator and graphics are really important to me, I've got to do the iceberg model here for you. There's visible culture. This part the brain loves. Language, food, rituals, institutions, laws. We like this. In fact, that's why we go to Chinatown in San Francisco or Little Italy in New York City, because the brain likes visible culture. What the brain doesn't like is invisible culture, the below the surface stuff. And I think it was Jerry that mentioned beliefs, values, norms, relations, perceptions, all that below the surface stuff, brain doesn't like it very much. In fact, that's where most intercultural misunderstanding happens. When you are in a conversation, or should I say argument, conflict with your spouse, with your kid, with your coworker, it's often because of invisible culture, different sets of values, beliefs, experiences, and they're not visible yet. So here's another thing. So if we refer back to the story, let's call her Maureen, the store manager. She had a different set of values, being from a different generation than her younger employees. And because she hadn't yet spent the time to hear that employee out, she hadn't learned what was important to him, what was his norm, what his beliefs were. She hadn't done that deeper dive. So here's another part of culture that we need to know about, is that there's dominant culture, a group that's the most powerful, widespread or influential. And there's non-dominant culture, a distinct group that exists with, but subordinate to the more dominant group. And this is true, well, just like I said, in every country in the world has a dominant culture and non-dominant cultures. Every place of worship, probably the easiest one to kind of wrap your mind around is a school. The principal sets the tone, that's the dominant culture of that school. And every classroom has a smaller, distinct culture that's equally as important, but it's not the most powerful and widespread. So it might be a way to understand it. And a distinct group can be differentiated by any number of norms, right? Any number of distinctions: race, nationality, gender, appearance, caste, religion. And when we're talking about diversity, it also comes in two flavors. So often organizations are thinking right now that diversity is just the visible part, but there's these invisible elements that make us unique as well. And neither can be denied, put down, shoved aside, or made invisible. We want people to feel seen. And why does diversity matter? Because typically when you're part of that non-dominant group, there's a significant impact. Productivity and ability to reach potential, safety, health, and emotional well-being, no kidding. Ability to navigate financial and legal systems. And so often how you look, how you're perceived determines your well-being. And there is so much research out there to support that. It's why it's so important right now that we're addressing diversity. So what makes an employee feel invisible? We're going to do a deeper dive and go to kind of the root cause. If you'll recall in my introduction that Pat did for me, I'm an intercultural development person. When I go into an organization, the only thing I'm doing is helping people enter into courageous conversations with cultural intelligence. And the way we get to determine your ability level to engage in a conversation with somebody that's different is we take the IDI. It's a 20-minute online evaluation and inventory that lets you know your current stage of development so that you know where you're going to go next, where you are and where you're going next. These are the 5 stages. Denial, you'll recognize these. Polarization, minimization, acceptance, and adaptation. In our society right now, we think we're in polarization, but actually we're not. We're actually practicing minimization on one another. And the reason I can make that statement, it's a pretty strong statement, is the IDI has been around for about 20 years, and the IDI has been back translated into 18 languages. It's used globally to determine a person and an organization's ability level to engage with conversations with people that are different. And what's pretty extraordinary is that 68% of the people that take the IDI around the world are in minimization. The thing is, when you get under stress, like on social media, thank you very much, you fall back to this polarizing language that's alienating to people. But what we're mostly doing to one another is minimization. And minimization, it's a culprit for making us feel invisible. It's what we're practicing. I have clients in the UK, India, and China. Different forms, but still practicing minimization. Because it's such an important concept that we don't know that's there, I just want you to know the good part about minimization is it focuses on what we all have in common. People in minimization see our common humanity. What Geraldine and I have in common is much bigger than our differences. But if I don't recognize those differences and I minimize those differences, this is what starts to happen. I assume that her experience is like mine. And I dismiss those differences if I'm minimizing somebody, because I don't want to upset the apple cart. And it inadvertently, and sometimes intentionally, pressures people into assimilation. And that's what makes people feel invisible. I had a lot of fun working with my colors and making it disappear. But no joke, sorry, I made light of it. And this is what is so hurtful. So in your chat box, so normally when I'm doing a workshop, there aren't quite this many people in a room and we just kind of open it up to, but since there's so many of us, I think I'll stick. Kelly, is that okay if I kind of just stick with the chat box? So how does minimization impact you? This is what we're practicing on one another. Just a couple of sentences in the chat box. Sorry, a couple of words. Please don't write me sentences. Minimization sounds like to your child, oh, get up, you're fine, when you actually don't know if they're fine. Minimization can sound like, I don't see color. That's kind of like saying, what's that like saying? It's like saying, Gabe, I don't see your manhood, right? That's part of who you are. Of course, we see people's distinctions. We see their race, we see their color. Patty said that minimization can be deflating, and Susie said insincere. Yeah, lack of recognition. Oh, I missed that one. I'm sorry, y'all. You're coming in hot. Pat said, do you see me? It feels like that. Ali says, you don't feel acknowledged. And Geraldine says it feels disrespectful. Yeah, it does. Brandy says it leads to ignorance and hurtful comments. Yeah, because you haven't found out. It's based on assumptions. Yep. Janola says it makes me angry. Oh, it pisses off Janola. I love you, girlfriend. You're so funny. Now I know why you're Patty's friend. Sarah says it's based, Sarah, you actually nailed it. Minimization is based on assumption. So rather than having a conversation with Tyler, for example, and finding out more about him, I make assumptions about him and act on those assumptions. So I remember a man saying to me, this was at kind of when the Me Too movement was igniting. And he said, I'm just not going to say anything at all. I can't compliment a woman. I'm just not going to say anything at all. And one of the things that I said, can I push on that a little bit? And he said, yeah. And I said, just so you know, that's minimization. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, if you think about it, there are more CEOs that are named John than there are female CEOs of Fortune 500 companies in the United States. Women need to be mentored by men. And that's our reality right now in a male-dominated society. So you being silent and minimizing her, she actually needs you to be a mentor. Well, if I can't compliment her, and I'm like, wait, what I hear is that you like compliments. Yeah, of course, we all like compliments. And I'm like, no, that's an assumption. One of the things that you might want to know in light of the Me Too movement is that 1 in 5 women will be sexually assaulted at some point in their lives on the planet versus 1 in 71 men. So sexual violence is a problem globally, particularly for women. So when you compliment a woman on how she looks, there's a 20% chance, right, if I'm doing my math right, that compliment might be perceived as a threat. Well, what do I say? Well, how about you compliment her work instead of her wardrobe? Now we're not minimizing. Oh, okay. Then he went on and changed the subject. So I knew he had found some kind of satisfaction. So what can we do? In lieu of minimization, remember those upper two? This is cultural intelligence. We can accept or appreciate a person and their uniqueness, and we can adapt our words and actions to show genuine respect. Am I asking you to change you? No, I'm asking you to notice them. There's a difference. So what does that sound like to an employee so that they feel seen and valued? These are the tools that I'm going to give you. The first one, remember we talked about contemplation being an element. I want you to slow it down. You're in a conversation with somebody who has a different perspective, so your brain's on high alert or more alert, I should say. I want you to slow down. Take 3 deep breaths, or maybe 2. Observe your reaction. Notice how you're feeling on the inside. You've got your heart and your gut you can listen to, not just your head. In America, we live from the neck up, and I want all 3 centers of knowing online. I don't know if you can see, but I'm touching my gut and my chest and my head and all 3 centers of knowing. Just feel you. If you're reacting strongly, if you're feeling angst, slow it down. You got time. And if you're safe, if you don't need to get out of that situation, you proceed with curiosity and wonder. Now we got room for some cultural intelligence, because you can ask gently now. If you're going to proceed with curiosity and wonder, and remember that American cultural characteristic of curiosity can come on really strong, particularly if you're part of the dominant white culture and you're talking with somebody of color, right? Historically, for 400 years of oppressive history in the United States, a white person asking a person of color questions can lead to what? Their children being taken away, people going to jail, people being deported. So we don't want to make assumptions that we can just ask, but we can ask gently, would you mind telling me the story? What was the impact of my words? So go back to the example of men talking to women, if you give a compliment and you're not sure it landed right, you can ask, what was the impact of my words? Don't want to ask, did I offend you? Don't need to plant seeds for negativity. Just, what was the impact of my words? Or how did that land on you? And how are you feeling? I might even say, do you mind if I ask you a question? How are you feeling? If somebody doesn't want to engage with you, let it go. Because the relationship is more important than you getting your answers. This is an opportunity for you all to get to shared understanding. So we're going to do a check for cultural intelligence. Remember these 5 elements. So there's stop, there's ask gently, and check for your cultural intelligence. So I'll ask you to apply. What did the store manager, what did Maureen do to ensure her employees felt valued and seen? At this point, if you'd like to just unmute and kind of call out, or if you want to, if you're a little more extroverted, if you're more introverted, feel free to continue using the chat box. I just need to know your name because your name is really important to me. Lisa said she listened. Yeah. Could I ask you all to consider using some of this language? Lisa, she listened because she was curious and she had the courage to slow it down. Spot on. Jeff says he slowed down and listened. So there's that, Jeff, there's that contemplation piece. Thank you. Keep going. How else did Maureen use her newfound cultural intelligence? Kelly says context is so critical to appreciate where they're coming from. Kelly, you got it. Yeah. And Jerry said she had compassion about how he felt. Yes. Yeah. Excellent. Jeff said adding a human element to the work. Yeah. Kelly described my work as teaching soft skills. Yes. Yes, ma'am. John said, had the courage to listen and not assume. Yeah. Yes. John, you're actually naming moving out of minimization and into acceptance and adaptation. Thanks, John. Feel free to call out, unmute and call out. Just tell me your name or put it in the chat box. Somebody could mention something about courage. Oh, John did. That was silly.
This is Gary Bolden.
Hi, Gary.
Hi. I would say that she had the courage to take the risk of approaching him and not knowing how he was going to react.
Yeah, and I think that's a particularly tricky part, is cultural intelligence has a risk element. It has a mystery. You actually don't know how the person's going to respond when you engage in a conversation out of minimization, and it takes courage.
This is
Absolutely.
Dennis Lavely. She asked gently.
Yeah. She definitely asked gently. She wanted, and part of asking gently is moving into your heart and really wondering from this place, not just from your head. So often we make it all diversity inclusion efforts academic-y, and it's just cold. John Alexander and I were actually talking about the fact that you've got to move into your heart when you're doing this work. You have to feel with a person. She felt with him. Another reason it takes courage is because in dominant culture in the United States, race, sex, religion, and politics are off the table. We're not supposed to be talking about those things because it upsets people. And part of my community, my church community, is an African-American church. And I remember saying that out loud in front of one of my fellow church members. And she looked at me and she goes, Amy, what do you talk about then? Meaning, what do you white people talk about? And I said, the weather. And she just kind of rolled her eyes. And I said, but men are allowed to talk about sports. And she just like had nothing for me, nothing more. It takes courage to talk with people about their differences, which is why we want to tread lightly and ask gently. We have to take care of ourselves. Move in slowly. We don't have skills, particularly if we identify with a dominant white culture. We don't have skills for talking with people. And why is that? Because we grew up, weren't learning white history in schools. The average white person knows one black person. The average black person knows 8 white people. And that's partly because of demographics, but 18% of St. Louis is African-American and 13% of our country is African-American. So it's partly demographics and partly because the brain doesn't expose itself to people and things that are different. It's harder. It's harder. So we have to take care of ourselves as we're learning how to do this. It takes courage. Kelly says courage is so incredibly hard for many women. After years of negative comments by men, it can be deflating. Same for those of color. It's hard to shed the experience to move past it and rise above. Kelly, thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that. That took courage. It is. And whatever happens to white women, I just want to say happens to women of color on steroids, right? We women are not all in the same box, right? Just like men, African-American or Hispanic men and white men, very different experiences, right? Such experiences that are life-threatening. Well, for women, it's the same. Brandy says, there's a real fear of legal action based upon saying the wrong thing. So people are terrified to talk with one another. Oh, Brandy, you bring up a great point, especially for HR. Oh my God, that's awesome. So let's just dial back and this is exactly why you're going to slow that conversation down and not rush in with your assumptions and make strong statements. They're going to screw you and the company. Don't do that to yourself. I want you to slow down, take a breath, observe your reaction and the feeling of the other. And only if you're safe psychologically, physically, proceed with curiosity and wonder. The difference is you're not going to be the knower, you're going to be the listener. And not going to be the knower, you're going to be the learner. You're not going to be the speaker in this case, you're going to be the listener. You are providing a space, Brandy, for it to open up between the two of you. So it's not just about me anymore. It's not just about you, Tom. It's about this space between us and what we can discover together. And that's why I'd ask gently those questions. You get in trouble when you make strong statements. You don't get into trouble when you're asking questions and you've asked permission to ask. Jeff says, is anyone else having more issues than before COVID having heartfelt communication over Zoom link? That's a great question. And when you're not used to working from a heart space and opening up space with another person, this can be awkward. But I gotta tell you, I do an ID, after somebody takes an IDI, I do an hour-long debrief with them and we set goals for moving to the next stage. And so I work virtually all the time and I don't have a whole lot of problem helping people open up, partly because I've modeled it. And so Jeff, you bring up a really great example. My husband didn't grow up in the United States. He's a foreign-born national, but he came to the US in college and developed an American accent. So he looks like a white American male. But when he's talking with other men, he doesn't understand American football because he grew up playing rugby and what he calls world football. And he just doesn't understand why in American football, the foot never touches the ball. And so he doesn't get that. He can't even talk about sports. So whenever he hears somebody with an accent, he goes right at them. He wants to connect with them. And people will shy away. And he said to me, what do I do? Because I want to connect. And I said, well, people who aren't in a position of power and you look like you're a person in power, being a white male, you get to soften your approach. Well, what do I say? And how about you say something like, I didn't grow up in the United States. I grew up in Rio de Janeiro and in Rotterdam and Bangkok. May I ask where you grew up? And he reports now that people will engage with him because he shared a little bit of himself. And that's what you can do, Jeff, online, is share a little bit of you. Kelly said, I've been able to really connect more due to freed up time. I felt more connected to many of our members and with new members. Hard to have as many one-to-one with larger crowds. Yeah, it's amazing what a 30-minute virtual one-to-one will do to better connect. And Kelly, I have a feeling part of the reason you're successful is because you're showing a little bit of yourself. You're being real. And by that means just a little bit vulnerable, and just like Cyril, sharing a little bit of you, not a lot of you, because that takes courage, just a little bit, just a little bit. So how do you do cultural intelligence tools to help an employee feel seen and valued? Think about your 3 tools that you've got and think in terms of real-time feedback, mutual mentoring. Now we're both listening and learning. Real-time feedback is not, I'm coming at you, but let's sit and learn together how we can make this better for you. Now we're thinking in terms of career mapping, so people have a vision for the future. I've written a blog that includes career mapping and mutual mentoring, acknowledging milestones when people have little successes, kudos. Collaborative work, which means people are listening and learning together. And people want professional development so they can feel seen and valued. Is anybody feeling a little courageous about applying these cultural intelligence tools to any of these elements? And you can either call it out or you can put it in the chat box, whatever you're comfortable doing. Jane gave me a thumbs up. What's that for, Jane?
Hey, Amy, it's John. Can you hear me?
Yeah, John.
All right, I was thinking it'd be great for people to just be courageous enough to start collaborative work in a workplace with other people who don't look, think, or maybe it's the same gender as them.
Yeah. It takes, so what happens with the brain, and the reason the brain hangs out with people that are like it, other brains like it, is the brain, and I actually do a whole workshop on, a 90-minute workshop on unconscious bias. And one of the things that we talk about is we hang out with cultures and thought patterns that are like us, because then we can kind of relax, right? Mm-hmm. We would much prefer not to be on alert and be in a room with different people and different ways of thinking, because that means I'm going to have to work harder. And so when you're entering into a situation, a collaborative situation with people who look and feel and seem different, you have to go, okay, my brain's going to have to be more awake, more alert. Okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm part of the dominant culture and I'm not really accustomed to that, right? I'm used to being pretty comfortable. And so there's this kind of acknowledgement of sitting with, slowing down and sitting with you and going, I can do this. It's a 30-minute meeting. It's a 60-minute meeting, because I want to make sure that John feels seen, for example. So maybe if you go into it with thinking about how the other person's impacted. Actually wrote a blog 2 months ago, how to stop tokenizing people. And we actually address this, that being there in that conversation for the other person as much as you, not just you. Thanks, John.
Something I wanted to say about the mutual mentoring, and I think this is really critical in the AEC industry, where we see a lot of top-notch professionals who have a tremendous amount of experience. And I think it's really important to remember, I don't care if it's someone that's just out of school and coming to work for you. We can all learn from each other. And when you give that person the feeling that you care enough to actually hear what they say because you think you can, as opposed to I'm the boss and I know everything, and you know, this is the way we do things here, and you need to be listening to me, and I'm doing you the favor of mentoring you, as opposed to that. I think that is a across the board problem, and certainly everybody, I'd love to get some feedback from everybody else about that. But I've seen it time in and time out at many companies.
Thank you. Is this Brandy talking?
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have said my name. It's Brandy.
Brandy, thank you for pointing out the term mutual mentoring. because what particularly Gen Y and Gen Z is looking for is mutual mentoring, not what you're talking about is minimization in action. I'm going to assume I know what you need, whereas in fact, I don't. And there's a lot that my kids teach me. And you know, what's interesting is it doesn't demean me and my role as their mom. What it does is it opens up this space between us for mutual learning. So I've been on the planet longer. I've had more experiences than they have. So I've got some pretty extraordinary perspective, and I have conversations across international and domestic lines all the time. And so my oldest daughter is actually an exhibit developer for an architectural firm for museums. And one of the things that she and I talk about is how can museum exhibits be more inclusive? How can museum exhibits include more stories? And she'll come to me and ask, well, how do I help this museum director begin to think about including more stories? And for that museum director who might be thinking about their bottom line, I'm like, well, you go in, you find your leverage. If the bottom line is the concern, you tell them they're going to reach a broader market if they include more diverse stories. You'll have them. And Tally's like, okay. I'm like, that's cultural intelligence. If it's not in his heart yet, that's okay. Let's go in through his pocketbook or her pocketbook. But that doesn't mean as that person discovers more and more stories that they won't soften over time when you're in relationship with them. So Tally's got stuff to teach me about the museum industry and how cultural intelligence impacts that. My second daughter down, Abby, she's a video producer, a journalist with Business Insider. She's a white woman moving into spaces where business owners don't look like her. And when I wrote that blog, How to Stop Tokenizing People, I actually interviewed Abby and her boss, who is African-American, a second generation African-American. So very different perspectives, and how to get the story because the stories are worth hearing from people of color. And Abby has to use all of this because she's not inherently trustworthy with her white skin. And sometimes she has to pursue and pursue and pursue. And it could take a month or two before that Black business owner says, all right, I'll let you in. She develops a relationship, and then she can get the real story, which is so cool. Wait, I missed somebody. Let me just tell you, since we're coming up on more specifically Q&A time, how this fits, how my work, what I've showed you today, fits in the bigger picture. This workshop we're doing today is an echo of my first workshop, making the case for diversity, because so often people don't even understand why they would diversify an organization. They don't have any idea that they could reach a broader market. But I make the case for that, and I don't make any assumptions. And that workshop series is square in the middle of the whole developmental program. We start with the IDI, and we figure out where Kelly and her team are, for example, with engaging with people that are different. And then that's one-to-one work. And then the workshop is like this. It's a format for 20, 30, 40 people to learn together and kind of help people step into conversations that initially could feel weird. And then we move into small groups. I want to start, or I am starting, I should say. I think Brandy would get after me for not saying that right. A whole movement around cultural intelligence, compassionate movement. So if you'd like to take the IDI, I can send you a link, and for you, we'll do a discount for those that are attending today. In a corporate space, it's $695 to do the IDI and that debrief and that goal setting. And I do a deep discount for individuals who attend. And if you're not, if you'd like that link, you can email me, or I can send you a summary. I'd love to be connected with you on LinkedIn so I can share with you kind of how this plays out. And of course, going through your mind, when my network needs this work, because you know people do, you can take a snapshot and reach me very easily. So questions and insights that have come to mind. And if you're a chatbot person, feel free to put that in. Well, let's move into the Q&A time. Or you can call out, just tell me your name. I'd appreciate it. Maggie said, it's so important to recognize the individual and adapt. Yeah. Understand how an individual prefers to receive feedback, recognition, or communicate goes a long way in connecting and building trust. So Maggie, to your point, talking with an individual and seeing what they need, that's what works. And I got to say out loud, it also takes time. And who's got time? We live in a dominant culture that keeps us moving and has a sense of urgency. We don't have time for relationship building. That's the perception. But I want to tell you that a doctor can cut his or her litigation in half by spending an extra 3 minutes with patients. So we're not talking about an extraordinary amount of time to hear someone out, to open up the space between the two of you. Just takes a few minutes, little check-ins here and there. How you doing? And because so many people around us are practicing minimization, they'll say, oh, fine. And then what you're gonna do, for example, Geraldine, you might say, no, really, how are you doing? Or what I asked an Indian client of mine, what do you say instead of how are you doing? He goes, I'll ask, how are you feeling? That's what we do in our culture. That could kind of wake up the brain that you really mean it. How are you feeling? Patty said, I find that most of us, to improve all relationships, need to spend more time listening and less time talking. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have an example of that? Brandy says, can you offer some advice for people who are not normally very open? How can they start the process? Thank you. Thank you for that question. And the process doesn't change. You don't have to be open to slow down and take a breath. You don't have to be open to go, can I ask you a question? But if you're not, if you're introverted, so I'm introverted. I'm what you call a gregarious introvert or a high functioning introvert. I need time alone to gather myself and get energy. But I love to talk with people, and I'm not inclined to put myself out there, which is why it's a little weird that I feel compelled to be in this work. And I came into it kicking and screaming. For 4 months after Michael Brown was killed, I fought it. I'm like, nope, I'm not doing this work. I don't want to know. I don't want to know how I've been complicit. I don't want to know. And then a series of events, it was like, fine. And eventually I started my process. And so I was very hesitant at first, stepping into it. And I learned what I'm teaching you is what I, as a white person, learned to do. Slow it down, take a breath. And not if I'm comfortable, but if I'm safe, because I'm not going to be comfortable. This takes courage. To Kelly's point earlier, it takes courage. But if I'm safe, proceed with a gentle question. Brandy, does that answer your question?
Sorry, yes, and I was just really meaning it towards people, especially those who don't feel that they're extroverts or feel uncomfortable approaching people. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah. You're definitely going to feel uncomfortable. For those reasons that I said earlier, particularly if you're white, and this is a very weird space. And it's actually not just an American dominant culture thing. Pretty much every country in the world, every country in the world has a dominant culture, and you're not used to being the learner and the listener. We're used to being comfortable and the knower. And so this is being in this kind of mysterious space. Damn, it's unnerving for us. And I get humiliated probably once a day. I kind of wait for it. Oh God, I screwed up. And what's really interesting is, like, if I'm talking with my pastor and I come in hot with my ideas, and I'll be looking at him and I'm go, I'm coming in pretty strong, aren't I? And he'll go, yeah, but I know your heart. Yeah, I'm part of the dominant culture. I just own it. And he gives me grace. Gives me grace, especially if I own it. In that blog I told you about how to stop tokenizing people, Abby actually shares some of her strategies for as a white woman coming into this work. Dennis says cultural intelligence is comparable to cultural competency, which was documented in an SLC3 white paper a few years ago. It's identified cultural competency as the integration of knowledge, awareness, and sensitivity. Yeah. Yeah. And yep, I can see that there's knowing, there's head, there's heart, and there's gut in that. Yeah. Dennis, thank you. So
This is Dennis, and I think, if Kelly can confirm, I think that document may still be on the SLC3 website. I'm not positive if it's still there or not, but I know it had been for some time.
Absolutely still there, and he's absolutely right. Yes. So you can access that through our resources.
So Kelly, I've actually written a document that, if you wouldn't mind putting on the website, that actually defines cultural intelligence and the elements, because the intercultural development inventory talks about cultural competency. My concern with that word and why I've shifted to cultural intelligence is cultural, as you know, cultural intelligence is ongoing. We're always learning. I never feel done, competent. I often am uncomfortable. And so it's why I prefer this term. And also when I use cultural competency, people are like, what? Cultural intelligence has enough connection to emotional intelligence that people can kind of get it. The difference being cultural intelligence is aware of and appreciating the other's context. Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that connection that you made.
So Amy, this is obviously a heartfelt topic. This goes back to, in our industry in particular, there's emotion is usually frustration, to be truthful. It is a stressful environment. You're project manager and you're herding cats. There's all kinds of struggles with safety, you name it. It just is a high stress world. And then on top of it, you have professionals like engineers who typically don't like to bring emotion into anything. And they tend to be a little more black and white. And so I think part of what could be a struggle for those of us who are completely opposite of those who we're working with, and we're bringing our emotion in, and they are stepping back and saying, oh, don't bring that. I've been told I lack empathy. I have heard that for years now, where I was the fish out of water because I'm marketing inside an engineering firm, and don't bring this in, even though this is what we need. We need this personality. This is the personality that can go out there and get the work. But that's, I think, where I think a lot of us can struggle.
Yep.
In particular. And how, my big question is the first step of when someone says, especially if they're a supervisor, and they say, I've been told I lack empathy, and you're sitting there thinking, I've realized this, and it's been such a struggle for me, and I don't know how to get past this. How do I fix that? How do I help that? My answer was educate, and I try to share more, get the feelings going, but it's a struggle.
Yeah. Can I take a swipe at the answer and you tell me how it lands on you, and we open up the space between us?
Sure.
Tell me the context of being told. Would you tell me the context of when you were told you lack empathy? That strikes me as funny because I can't imagine somebody more empathetic than you, but.
Well, no, it wasn't me. My supervisor, This goes back into me being in marketing and working for, I don't want to beat up any firms because I loved everywhere I've been. So I'll just preface that.
Just give me the
But
context.
in engineering, and you have an engineering manager, for example, and I can take me back to 2001. In that
Can I
particular,
ask you to, are you sharing with me a specific example? That's what I need to.
yes, yes.
Okay,
So
thank
for
you.
example, engineering manager manages the operations. And I can tell he's just not very much of an emotional person.
Yeah.
But I'm struggling with, things like people turning off the printer or canceling print jobs when we're trying to get an RFP out. This is a real story. And so I'm getting very emotional because I have deadlines to meet and people are actually behaving this way. So instead, this person is saying to me, well, I know I've been told I lack empathy because I've said, look, I'm not sure you're understanding and appreciating the struggle that I'm having. And so it kind of went on and on for a while until they retired and then said, I'm sorry, I really didn't listen to you. I better appreciate where you were coming from. And then turned around and said everything that I've needed to hear the whole time.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Because of other good feedback that have come in and things I accomplished. But I'm sharing this because I know that this is something that has been, people have experienced across the board. I've heard it, but it's just something that I believe from certain types of professionals, they tend to
Sure.
just disengage their emotions. But then if you're working with someone who's more highly emotional, which I definitely am, that they just want to disconnect that.
So Kelly, first of all, I just want to acknowledge that it must have felt awfully good that in the end, at least, he acknowledged and saw you.
Yes.
At least eventually, because I can imagine that was heartbreaking that he couldn't appreciate your struggle when you were in it.
Yes, I think a lot of marketing people in particular tend to probably experience some of this because they're the fish out of water within organizations, and it's hard for them to appreciate where they're coming from.
Yeah, yeah, and I would suggest to you that when you're calling it emotional, what you were feeling was invisible. You were not being acknowledged for this struggle, and we all get emotional, and I don't care what department, your background, we are human beings and we all get emotional, whether it's pissed off, sad, jazzed, thrilled, anxious, we all are emotional. And some people show it more. Women are allowed to be sad and men in our culture are allowed to be mad, but we can't flip that scenario. Welcome to minimization. Well, I'm just going to call BS on all of it. And we are all emotional beings and need to feel seen. And what's so sad is that he just didn't know that. So can I offer you a little trick?
Absolutely. That's why I'm suggesting it, because it was a repeated behavior from company to company to company.
Yes, of course.
Truthfully.
And I know that you're not trying to trash a company. I hear that. You're just
100% not. No.
You're trying to feel seen. So I'll give you a little trick of cultural intelligence. If you want to feel seen, see the other person first. So it might be to the engineering manager, man, I know you don't have time for this. You don't have time for this shit. I mean, just name it. I know you are so busy and so overwhelmed. You acknowledge his feelings, his context, his experience. That opens up the space. And then you get to ask, can I share something that's frustrating me? And now he'll have the bandwidth to hear you. But he can't hear you until he feels heard. It's a secret of cultural intelligence.
I think that's great advice. And that's really where I was going is it can be, I go back to being intimidated sometimes. I don't know if it's showing my age and near 50, where Gen Xers in particular, a lot of women feel more insecure because of, again, a culture of being dominated by men and having to fight through and be something significant and seen. And I don't think that the Y generation in particular is fighting as hard. They're not struggling as much with that because it's been they've had a different world than we've had, which is great news. It's not perfect, but certainly that's something that I think we kind of step back and don't want to say what we want to say, even though there's somebody like me who's highly expressive and usually pretty outgoing and not afraid to say things, but I still do that.
So Kelly, can I push on that a little bit?
Sure.
There's a little bit of an assumption there that it's easier for the Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z. You actually don't know if it's easier for women. It's still a male-dominated society. The men still have predominantly the power. And there's still an opportunity for you to hear them. What's your experience like? Just ask them. Because they might not be finding it any easier at all. I don't know. I'm not correcting you,
Yeah,
I'm
and I
letting
speak
you
to
know.
that because I've done a lot of workshops on generational marketing
Mm,
and doing a lot of polling, and I had a pretty significant team of millennials
yeah,
in my past. So
yeah,
just saying that I have not heard them complain as much about the same things that the Gen Xers have,
yeah,
or baby boomers for that matter. So that's where I'm coming from, because I do have a lot of background in
yeah, you do.
focusing on generational aspects because of marketing.
Yep. Absolutely. You do have a lot of experience. Thank you for letting me know that. And I also want to keep in mind that if somebody has experienced some kind of sexual violence, that can have a significant impact in all generations on both men and women. So it's just something to keep in mind. And how this comes back to, Brandy, you said, reiterate why this is important for recruiting and retention. For retention of employees. So we've got a high stress world, which means it's actually not a high stress world. We live in a capitalist society, and all of the countries that got that were industrialized at the same time live in task-oriented societies. And that would be Germany and Denmark and the UK, Canada, and the United States. We're very task-oriented, and that's where our urgency comes from. So the stress is something that we've created, which is why when I'm asking you or suggesting to you that you stop and slow down and take 2 to 3 minutes with someone, that's when retention starts. People want to stick around when people feel seen and valued. And when people feel seen and valued, they're going to tell other people, this is your company, this is your organization. Brandy, did I answer that point?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's equally as important for the recruiting side, or at least I'd actually like to open it up to anyone else in here to comment on either side, because I think when people are looking for new people that they want to bring on, culture is becoming even more and more important, as opposed to necessarily, whether they're going to get enough benefits and the money. That's all got to be in line, but they really want to know what it's going to be like to work there. What's a day in the life work look like? What are the people like? Am I going to fit in? So I think it's kind of on both ends, if you want to keep people and also if you want to recruit them. And I'm interested to get some feedback from everyone else about that.
I'll share a story with you, Brandy. So this is John speaking, by the way. So I recently just sold my P&C business as an independent insurance broker, shelved my financial firm and partnered with New York Life. And shortly after joining the company, I started receiving all of this, all of these internal emails promoting the African-American markets within the company. I'm like, okay, slow down a little bit. Didn't ask for this. And
right.
I get it. I get that you all want to make me feel welcome and whatnot, but it would have been nice to, at least have someone approach me like, hey, we have this program within our firm, are you interested? Versus it makes you feel like you're there to hit a quota.
Absolutely.
Fill a number or fill a vacancy. But, I do want to be a part of that, but it's still best that, that the recruiter could have come to me off to the side and asked, hey, we have this wonderful program within New York Life. We're trying to reach out to the African-American community. You know, I don't know if you're interested or not, but if you are, we have this amazing program and I would love to have you be a part of it. Versus,
Yeah,
Right. It gets back to Amy's whole point about assumptions and marginalizing our
Right, right. And it's a great company. I mean, I don't want to bash my company, but it's just an example of how recruiting can, you know, go wrong in a little bit.
Great, thank you for
John,
sharing that.
John, that's a great example of minimization. And understand, we're not here to bash any person or any company. What we're here to do is recognize cultural characteristics that are imposing themselves on our behavior. And the moment New York Life realizes that minimization seeped into that conversation, oh my God, nobody ever meant to kind of objectify you,
Right.
put you in a box because of your Black skin. They were trying to make you feel seen, but they made an assumption. And they went in with this knower rather than the learner. And it just what 3-minute conversation, 5 minutes. Hey, how do you feel about this, John? Could have changed that.
What if I don't want to work with the African-American market? What if that's
Maybe
not my
you
target market?
don't. You might want to work with women. I don't know.
I mean, of course I do want to work with my people, but what if I don't?
Absolutely.
You know?
Let's not assume.
Just ask me, you know, just approach me and get to know me a little bit first before you start sending me materials that you think I'm interested in.
I think we have
The
time.
decision was made based off my skin color, right? At the end of the day.
Right. So you want to feel seen, but you want to feel seen individually and not as representing a whole group.
Right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Which is why, Kelly, a little bit earlier, I want to be concerned about talking about entire generations. When you're entering into a conversation with a person, you're aware of this cultural characteristic, this racial difference, this generational difference, this gender difference. You're aware of that. And it becomes a stereotype if you approach somebody based on just that. But it becomes a cultural characteristic if you can approach them with this understanding of their generation or their race or their gender, and then get to know them, because this is about a relationship. And that's what brings retention. You want to stick around when somebody sees you. I think, Kelly, am I right that we need to wrap up?
Yes, we have a few more minutes for anybody that wants to add in. And I hear you, Amy. I think it's good to be equipped with as much information about generations.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
when you are communicating, it's generations, it's culture diversity. When you understand more, it certainly helps with communicating with anyone, just to have a unique, appreciation for them.
Yeah.
That's where I think it's not only critical for us to understand, from a marketing perspective, who we're targeting.
Right. Right.
But it's helped me more with being more individualistic. I understand that some of it could be, well, I'm just broad brushing a bit. At the same time, it has helped me to just know, in general, they probably do fall into this, and certainly getting to know them, but it allowed me to accommodate a workforce that truly I did not. My entire team running a marketing agency they were all Y, and one Z. And I have to say, it was eye-opening to be in that space when you are, in the middle of the Gen Xers and and being teased for wearing a scarf, because why would I do that? Just that experience really said, look, I need to really embrace this a lot more. And the more I could educate my clients on understanding these individuals within these generations, helps you not only target better, but it helps you relate and connect better. And at the end of the day, that's how you build relationships, just appreciating everyone. And that's the point I'm making, is that it can be really a struggle for some to do that. They may not have relator as a strength. They may not have individualistic as a strength, which I was just going to also mention, or I want to mention how we offer this IDI, just so we can get that to everybody. I do want to make sure that we get that to everyone. I also was curious
Kelly, I'll
about,
share a special link for this group.
that would be
To
awesome.
get the discounted rate.
Yeah, I think people, I'm sure they're probably very interested. I'm curious about any other things that you might be utilizing, like strength finders. A lot of people do strength finders, disc assessments, all those other things to help kind of identify what's your thoughts on that?
So there's a difference in cultural frameworks that specifically are working with kind of understanding the individual, as opposed to the IDI is understanding the individual in relationship with another person, which is my focus. To your point, Kelly, a person's context is what we get to hold lightly, not to peg somebody, but to hold their context so that we can appreciate their experience. We need to learn people's histories and people's contexts, just little by little, and so that we can enter into these conversations intelligently. So my focus is the IDI, and when we're doing a debrief and you bring your understanding from strength finders or DISC, that comes into the conversation between us. It's more about you, which is really cool. Let's wrap up. Would you mind if I just did my one word wrap up?
Go for it.
All right. So in the chat box, if you would write just how you're doing, how you're feeling. Oh my goodness, Kelly, I'm going to use a feeling word. There we go. How are you feeling right now? How are you doing? Tom said he's introspective. Ooh, that means I think I got a thinking, which is kind of cool. What's your one word? Anne says informed. Awesome. Jerry says encouraged. Sarah says motivated. Susie says energized. I find that. Kimberly says empowered. Oh, you're just using my word for my business. Thank you. Patty says inspired. Jeff says enlightened. Kelly says satisfied. Brandy says connected. Jackie is equipped. Awesome. I'll share this with you. Stop share. Thank you. I'll stick around. I actually have a debrief in 15 minutes that I need to start, but I can stick around for 10 minutes if people have questions for me.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Amy. It has been enlightening. I said satisfied because you did. I think you know probably what I'm going to say, but this is what we wanted to accomplish. I didn't plan to speak as much, but this is to me, such a critical topic and something I feel very passionate about myself. And I think what the direction where you come from is a very different perspective from where I've been trained. So it's been an interesting thing for me to hear it from that avenue and not in a marketing perspective. Because
Yeah, cool.
that's really where my world comes from. But thank you so much for being here today. It's been wonderful. Thank you, Pat, for emceeing. You did a great job, and hopefully you'll come back and do it again. I know that we always pull in our owners to MC, and Pat, we really appreciate you doing that. Also, I wanted to thank. What'd you say, Pat?
I said, you're welcome. And I just wanted to say, Amy, it's really encouraging that there's so many people still on the line after, a half hour, 45 minutes. I kind of watched that. I thought, okay, we're going to have a lot of people start to drop off because some of our programs, but you were very enlightening. I don't know about everybody else, but I did enjoy it today. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Patty, for your enthusiasm. Dennis asked me to put the link. I just put the link in there if you'd like to.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then we'll share it again too. So just reach out to us if you have any trouble getting that for everybody on here. Just want to quickly thank again our key program, our key sponsor, Cosney Wagner, and then all of our other sponsors. I won't rehash all that for you guys. Thank you to the Training Education Committee, especially Brandy Shear, for chairing this particular committee, but of course, all of our training and education committee members. We can't do this without you. Don't forget to check our website also for resources, our blog. The PDHLUs are there. how to get more involved. Obviously, we're always looking for committee members. That's the best way to be engaged with us. Also share as much information with us as well so we can share it. Social media, make sure that you are engaging with us and sharing information. And then last but not least, that survey is critical. Please, when this is emailed to you, please just take a few minutes to respond. We genuinely care about the feedback, so please make sure you do that. And we've been getting about 20% response, so let's up that this year. That would be wonderful. And then again, thank you all for taking the time this morning. And we have so many programs coming ahead. I'm excited to see all that we have to offer. Rebecca and I are working hard with all the committees to make everything happen. So thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Everyone have a great rest of the day and a great weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Patty.
Yeah, thank you,
Jerry?
Amy.
Thank you, Tom. Jerry, you said that your word was encouraged.
Yes.
What did that mean? Tell me more.
I'm a up and coming minority contractor here in St. Louis, and this type of conversation is needed. We're going to ask Kelly, is there any way we can get this type of training or these slides, or have you present to some of these diversity heads at some of these construction companies? You know, it's a feeling amongst us minority contractors is that you know, they're just asking us for numbers on these jobs or to participate on these jobs because they have to. I would like to get to a place to where they're doing it because they want to.
Amen. Amen. I think John Alexander would support you in that, right? Because we want it to come from the heart, not just from the head, not just numbers. I'd be happy to talk with more. Yeah, Brandy and Kelly can connect you with me. Also, you can just email me directly. John, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, before I get out of here, I'm going to play the devil's advocate. I'm going to ask you a question. So I am a cisgender Christian white male who voted for Trump. How am I heard enough to, I guess, start to hear others?
You don't look like a cisgendered white male.
I'm playing the devil's advocate.
What are you asking me, John?
So, of course, the space that we're going into with a lot of companies starting to care about diversity and inclusion. In those companies are going to be a lot of the cisgender white Christian males who voted for Trump. How do we go about inviting them into the conversation instead of making them feel attacked?
That's a good question. You're talking generally, and cultural intelligence tends to be specific. So can I share an example that's more specific?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I remember a couple of years ago, a white cisgendered male Christian said to me, sitting across the table at Starbucks, I don't understand why that football player takes a knee. And so I used my cultural intelligence and I put him first. And I said, I get it. You're upset because he's not respecting that flag, our flag. And it's a flag, and I'm married to a foreign-born national. I know how important the American flag, well, maybe not in Paris, but in all of the Norman countryside, the American flag flies at the same height as the French flag and all the Allied flags. I know how important that flag is because we saved their butts, right? And they are not speaking German today because of what we did. And he goes, yeah, you get me. So in that sense, John, I had him. And I don't mean that in a manipulative way. I just had his attention and I said, that flag is important. And when he said, you get it, you understand, I said, and now, John, now I asked permission. I said, can I push on that just a little bit? Because he felt seen and heard. Now I was allowed to push on it. He said, absolutely. And I said, I wonder what it's like for an African-American male when he's not on the football field in his uniform, but riding down the street, for example, on his bike, and he's just in jeans and regular old clothes. and walks out the door every day concerned about whether or not he's going to live through that day. And his wife is scared for his life. What's it like for him under that flag? Could it be that he has a very different experience under that flag? And he goes, this is a Christian man, right? And he said, I never thought of it that way. And I said, I know, until I started this work, I hadn't either. But I'm not sure you're wrong. And I know he's not wrong. Could it be that both of y'all are right? And he goes, yeah, I think we both are. Yeah. He changed the subject, which I knew he went on to the next topic, and I knew the needle had moved for him. And so, John, that's my very small example of how to invite somebody in to this work rather than call them out for being ignorant and stupid and racist and right.
Right. Yep. Because that's not going to work long term, right? It's just going to make one group of people go from feeling heard to unheard. Whether that was a perfect example. Yeah, your approach still lets them be heard, but then also offers them a different perspective.
It's for people of color, John, honestly, for Black people, my approach can be really annoying because I don't live with a sense of urgency that you do. I'm not afraid for my children's lives. So just so the rest of y'all know, John has 4 kids or 5 kids?
6. You're wrong.
Oh, 6. That's right. You had 6. Okay. Well, John has 6 kids. I have 4 kids. I'm not scared for my son's life. And so I don't live with this urgency. So I have the time and the bandwidth to say, hey, can I push on that and offer you a different perspective? Whereas somebody who lives with urgency may not want to find the leverage point. And I don't blame them. And I have been called out for not being aggressive enough. And I know that the moment I'm not in relationship with somebody, I lose my ability to influence them. And so I go in the back door. I go in that way that interests them because I don't want to lose my relationship with them. I want to keep moving the needle. And particularly, John, because I'm female, people expect me to be softer.
Mhm.
If I was a white male, I could probably get away with calling people out a little bit, but I can't. I got to invite people in. So I use it. Damn, I use it. Patty knows I use it. Janola knows I use it.
Yeah, that's good, Amy.
All right. Any other questions? Thoughts, insights? Dennis, thanks for your contributions today. That took courage. And Jeff, too, you put in a lot. Thank you.
All right. Good to see you, Amy. Great presentation. I've got to hop on another.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.